Or the point and the audio. And the audio, but not the video. Not the video. Yeah, that's right. Here you go, it's all yours. A PowerPoint. I'm just gonna make a adjustment. To say it's not gonna conflict, but it's only for insurance and that's gonna look like
Would you like the catch box on this side or the other? This one?
Yeah, this side.
Absolutely.
So give me what
You
is
know
the
what I
catch
can.
box?
So this is for
Q&A?
Q&A. We just
Ow.
we did this last time too. And it's recorded for everyone. Just so. This is the one you wanted up? Yeah. Okay, because I just did the adjustment. Hey, you're the my hard for CGE. Of course, yes. I went to the wrong room. No. Okay, good. CGE hurt me. What am I presenters? So yeah, it's good. There in the Q&A session. I think that one is going So this catches everything. Yeah. So this is the question thing, and you just throw it. Yeah. And it's been broadcast on YouTube. It's available. Yes, I can see that. You might wanna.
vitamin C. Again, some vitamin C.
No. The answer no, or you didn't? The answer I haven't gotten it out there, but I just wanted to ask you. Yeah. No, I know. It's still. Yeah. Okay. Yes, indeed.
All right. Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to the CGE side event at this session. I'm Dominique Corvet from the Transparency Implementation Support Unit of the Secretariat. And this side event is aiming at presenting the achievements of the CGE in assisting developing countries in implementing the MRV framework, as well as sharing lessons learned on overcoming challenges faced by NORAX 1 parties in preparing their national reports. And today, we will hear from a former CGE chair and current CGE member from Kenya on the achievements of the group. We will also hear from Malaysia on their experience and lessons learned in preparing their national reports to the convention. And unfortunately, our other speaker from Niger is not able to attend due to unforeseen last-minute reasons. But as you might know, the CGE is the oldest expert group under the convention. It has been providing technical assistance and advice to developing countries, which facilitated the preparation of their national communications and biannual reports. So it is one of the bodies under the convention that has a rich and long history of direct engagement with developing countries in improving their technical capacity to participate in the MRV arrangements under the convention. I will now give the floor to Mr. Stephen Kinguyu to present the work of the CGE. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dominic, and good afternoon, everyone. I am happy to see all of you. I'm actually standing in for the current CGE chair, Sin, and because he's engaged in a negotiation-related session that is facilitating in. So I also want to register his apologies. As we start, perhaps I also need to recognize other CG members who are in this meeting, Julia from the US, and of course, Kyoto Tanabe, representing the IPCC. If others, of course, join us along the way, we will introduce them to you because we think that's important. So I'll straight away go to the presentation. Of course, today we want to share on the achievements of the CGE and the success stories, of course, with respect to national communications and biannual update reports from developing country parties. So the first slide, of course, we want to share, of course, just to remind ourselves on the mandate and the terms of reference of the CGE. Of course, the CGE's mandate was renewed at COP19 for another 5 years, stretching from 2014 to 2018. And the objective, of course, of establishing the CGE is to improve the process of and the preparation of national communications and biennial update reports by parties not included in Annex 1 to the convention, of course, popularly known as non-Annex 1 parties, by providing these parties with the requisite technical advice and support. The CGE as a way of course, attempting to meet its mandate, prepared a 5-year program, which focuses on key strategic priorities. These are building the capacity of developing country parties to facilitate the implementation of measurement, reporting, and verification and arrangements under the convention. And 2, to enhance the sustainability of national communications and the biennial update report processes. 3, to enhance the collaboration and cooperation with the other global initiatives, of course, that are involved in capacity building for developing country parties in matters of reporting. And 4th, to enhance the communication and outreach. And then lastly, of course, to ensure the availability of resources and optimal working arrangements for the operations of the CGE. Next slide, please. So the next slide shares shares the way the CGE, of course, does its work, of course, by supporting parties to participate in the MRV process or MRV framework. And at the top row, of course, you find the steps, of course, involved in the international MRV process, where you start, of course, with the submission of either national communications or BURs, and this, of course, followed by the international consultation and the analysis process. And of course, below each box, you can easily see the relevant decisions, of course, that mandated the CGE to get involved in the process. In the middle row, of course, you find the boxes representing what we envision as the domestic MRV process, and again, how it feeds into the BUR and the ICA process. And then, of course, at the bottom is the MRV of RED, the RED process. And this, of course, we know, of course, is voluntary because not all parties are involved in RED-related processes. But then we are parties, of course, submit RED processes, then the CGE, of course, and of course the TT, of course, which is organized by the Secretariat, then makes the necessary arrangements to make sure that, of course, the parties' RED component, of course, is appropriately analyzed and, of course, incorporated in the ICA process, which involves, of course, I'm sure we are all familiar with the process that involves a technical analysis phase, and then which will be followed by the facilitative sharing of views, which, of course, is ongoing today. Now, in terms of the next slide, of course, shares the capacity building activities of the CGE. And of course, the CGE, like I mentioned, of course, has developed tools and guidance materials that are aimed at providing institutional arrangements and gaining access to financial, technical, and capacity building resources. It has organized, of course, and continues to organize hands-on capacity building regional workshops. We have already had one for Africa. We have one for Latin America, isn't it? For Latin America in June. And then later in the year, of course, we'll have one for Asia and the Pacific. And these have worked very well, of course, in terms of capacity building for developing country parties. The CGE has also developed collaboration, of course, with the key global initiatives including the UNDP UNEP Global Support Program for National Communications and Biannual Update Reports. That also sits, of course, is represented in the CGE meetings, and of course, and of course also collaboration with the IPCC, and that's how Kyoto Tanabe, of course, comes in as a member of the CGE to represent the IPCC. We also hold monthly webinars, of course, covering different thematic areas, including vulnerability and adaptation analysis, mitigation, national greenhouse gas inventory, and of course, support. And this, of course, is from the perspective of reporting on these thematic areas. And then, of course, we also carry out outreach activities. Then, of course, some of them, of course, you are easily accessible. Of course, some of them we easily do through the social media, including, of course, what you have at the bottom right of the slide, of course, which is our Facebook page on which is titled, of course, Mitigation and Transparency Exchange. So those are some of course, some of the activities that we are involved in terms of outreach. Next slide. Okay. Now, in terms of resources, the CGE, of course, like I mentioned, of course, has been involved in the preparation of training materials on the key tasks, of course, based on the mandate of the CGE. This, of course, takes into consideration or into account the evolving needs of developing country parties. And of course, this includes also training on the preparation and the reporting of national communications that has been ongoing, and the materials, of course, are updated on a continuous basis, of course, periodically. We also have materials, of course, for the training on the preparation of biannual update reports, and of course, this is based on, of course, the decision, the COP decision of 2011. That established the guidelines, of course, for the preparation of biannual update reports. And of course, a decision from COP19 that gave the CGE the mandate to prepare the relevant training materials and conduct hands-on training workshops. These materials, of course, are available online on the CGE site. Now, we also have developed, of course, working with the Secretariat and other, of course, collaborating with other institutions, organizations. We have also developed training materials for the teams of technical experts that are involved in the ICA process, of course, in the analysis of biannual update reports. And of course, we all know that the international consultation analysis of BURs aims to increase the transparency of mitigation actions and their effects. And ideally, of course, we know it is supposed to be facilitative, so that we work with parties also to identify or to convert some of the gaps and weaknesses in their reporting into capacity building needs. The technical analysis of the biannual update reports, of course, is the first part of the ICA process. And it requires experts to review the BURs. And these experts, of course, must first and foremost be, of course, in the UNFCCC list of roster of experts. COP19, of course, requested the CGE to develop and organize appropriate training for the nominated team of technical experts for technical analysis. And that has been done. And that's why, of course, then you can easily, we already have those materials posted on the CGE website, and we have conducted several, of course, with the help of the Secretariat, several rounds of training of the TTE, nominated TTE members, of course, and the training, of course, as an integrated examination process. Next slide. So this next slide, of course, shows simply ideally demonstrates how easy it is, of course, to access the CGE training materials. And the CGE materials are available online on the CGE website. They are easily downloadable. And of course, also on that website, then you can also have access to CGE e-learning courses, which are, you can find them to the extreme right column of that slide. The training, of course, carried by the CGE or undertaken by the CGE for parties not included in Annex 1 is free. The only thing that is required, of course, is a nomination by the appropriate national focal point. And the training, of course, includes three main thematic areas: greenhouse gas inventory, preparation of greenhouse gas inventory, 2 mitigation actions and their effects or impacts, and then 3 on vulnerability and adaptation analysis. And these of course, are available, and this is also the similar materials, of course, that we use for the CGE regional training workshops. Next slide. Now, this slide simply illustrates that the CGE training materials are not just available in the English language, but also in both French and Spanish for those, of course, parties that whose main or primary communication language, of course, is either French or Spanish. And we are trying also to work with through the help of some of the parties, of course, to translate some of the materials into Portuguese for the sake of Portuguese speaking developing country parties. That's the end of this presentation, and I would want to thank you for listening to me. We will be open, of course, to field questions towards the end of this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stefan. That was a comprehensive presentation on the work of the CGE. And I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Yap Kok Seng, Malaysia's third National Communication and Biennial Update Report Project Manager, before we take a round of questions from the audience on both presentations. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dominic. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first thank the UNFCCC Secretariat and the CGE for the opportunity to share Malaysia's experience in preparing the BUR. Next slide, please. We submitted our BUR last year on the 3rd of March and just underwent the FSV this morning. During the preparation of the BUR, a key finding that enabled further improvement of our reporting system was building ownership among key stakeholders. This enabled a more complete and effective greenhouse gas inventory system to be put in place. And this arrangement has also resulted in a more robust MRV system. The learning by doing is a necessary process which enabled improvement. And Malaysia's BUR institutional arrangements is based on multi-agencies technical working groups. In a couple of areas, short-term consultants were also engaged to help build expertise. Next slide, please. Another lesson that we learned was to have good international collaboration where national capacities were enhanced. In this respect, we actually had help from the IPCC to the regional training, also expert reviewers from GIZ and also from the US EPA. And for the GHG inventory, we had training from the USAID lead program in last February and early March that helped to build a larger team of experts. Hence, Malaysia also engaged in external reviews to enhance transparency of the report. The other thing that we found was that sufficient financial resources, competent manpower, coupled with a dedicated team of experts would enable timely delivery of the BUR. The ICA process provided further clarity on the reporting requirements, which would improve future BURs. And we find that the technical analysis and the questions that was raised by the TTE to be very helpful in this, especially on the interpretation of the guidelines that was set in the UNFCCC decisions. Next. In the key challenges, the overall key challenge we faced was operationalizing a robust MRV system for mitigation actions. For the GHG inventory, there are guidelines, the IPCC 206 guidelines and also the revised 1996 guidelines to help us. But for the GHG inventory, there is no decision on which guidelines to use. And this has been a struggle for us to exactly how to use the guidelines for the quantification of the mitigation actions. Malaysia is increasing the pool of expertise for both the estimation and verification of results in this area. Additionally, information are not always available for quantification for both the greenhouse gas inventory and the mitigation actions. For the greenhouse gas inventory, often the activity data are not available according to the IPCC guidelines requirements. And for us to resolve this, a long engagement process is needed to convince data providers to collect and report additional data according to the IPCC guidelines requirements. Currently, Malaysia uses limited country-specific emission factors for the greenhouse gas inventory estimation. We are still dependent upon the emission factors, the default emission factors from the IPCC guidelines. And we are still building expertise on this area. We are also engaging the private sector to provide additional data and share the experience in their own internal process of GHG inventory estimation. And this sharing with the private sector actually gives us a better insight of their own internal processes and the processes of the GHG emissions within their sector itself. Next, please. On the lessons learned and best practices, we find that continuous engagement with key stakeholders, in particularly the private sector, helped Malaysia overcome some of the data challenges. For the private sector, it's mainly in the industrial processes and the product use sector that this engagement is necessary. This is done both through building trust and enhancing their capacity and understanding the UNFCCC's decision on the BUR reporting itself. The CGE training materials were useful to frame Malaysia's mitigation reporting tables, and their training also helped us in guiding preparation for the ICA process, in particular the technical analysis part, and also giving us an understanding of how the FSP will be conducted. Next, please. As next steps, Malaysia is currently preparing its third national communication and second biennial update report. It is expected to be submitted in the first quarter of next year. For the GHG inventory, we have moved towards using the 206 IPCC guidelines. For assessing the funding for the second biennial update report, the UNFCCC's Secretariat's clarification on availability of funding was useful. This helped to accelerate the BUR2 preparation. In terms of the future CGE technical assistance requirements, Malaysia welcomes CGE's technical assistance in the following areas: development of country-specific emission factors. One of the areas that we find that is very necessary, especially in fulfilling the NDC, is the emission projection modeling, which that is accurate. This is one of the areas that I think CGE should consider putting its efforts on. And also the quantification of needs for both the mitigation part, and also for the vulnerability and impact assessment and the quantification of adaptation needs. We feel that this will help to improve our reporting and transparency in the future reporting. That ends my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yap. So, as I said before, now we can open the floor for Q&A session. And please take your time because, as indicated earlier, the next presenter could not make it to this session. So we welcome every question you might have on either of the presentation or comments or point for discussion that could enrich the discussion regarding the experience of the CGE, but also the experience of a country that is already quite advanced and that have already undergone an FSV. So please raise your hand whoever has a question or something to share. Yes, please, somebody I don't know, but...
Thank you, Dominic. I have a question to CGE. You do have your training sessions, but is it open to everybody, or do you pick how does this training sessions take place? Because it's useful for us to actually follow some of your sessions, but often we have to go to the website to actually find what is the latest. Thank you.
Stefan, maybe you want to answer this one as a start?
Okay, fine. I thank you for that question. I was actually pausing because I thought we would take a few, then we can do one round of a few questions, but it's fine. So how we admit people to the training courses or to the training programs, ideally is because the CGE is a party organ. So it's a party driven, it's a party owned institution, of course, among many others, of course, under the UNFCCC. And therefore, ideally, we communicate, the Secretariat communicates information on the availability, especially the regional training workshops, among others. And that's a process all through, of course, within the framework of the CGE. And therefore, ideally, it's a national focal point who would give us nominations for participation into the courses. But the online training courses, the e-learning courses are open. You can register yourself through the online portal. So that one, for the online courses, the e-learning courses, you do not need to be registered by the national focal point. But then the regional workshops, the training of the team, the training of the team of technical experts, then you must be nominated by the national focal point. So that's the process ideally. Yes, Dominic.
Maybe, Stefan, if you allow me. Yes, the Secretariat doesn't have specific funding for this. This is not part of the core budget. So this is not what parties negotiate every second year. So this is supplementary funding that is raised by the Secretariat to make these activities happen on the ground. And this is what is happening at the moment for the building of sustainable national GHG inventory management systems and implementation of 2006 IPCC guidelines. But this being said, we go, of course, through to the NFP to nominate one person, the most suitable according to the topic of the training session. But there's always this possibility for the country to ask if they could send a second self-funded participant. Usually we don't go beyond the second person because for technical reason, I mean, practically we cannot accommodate so many, but we always have countries requesting for one additional, or several countries are asking for one additional participant. And this on a case-by-case basis, depending on the level of attendance to the specific workshop, we can accommodate. And we usually do that. And that's one of the possibilities where countries can use a line of their budget for the NC, for the BUR, whatever, to use it for capacity building and training. And that's an opportunity. It's always available. Yeah. Another question?
Hi, thank you both very much for your presentations. I have a question for Malaysia. It was very good to hear about your experience and some of the lessons learned and how you overcame some challenges. You mentioned that you engaged some short-term consultants for a few aspects to build expertise. And I was wondering whether you plan to continue to use consultants in your reporting going forward, or if you were able to use the experience of having them this time to help build your own institutional capacity and knowledge so that you'll be less dependent on them in the future.
The expertise that we source from the consultants are short-term. This helps to build the capacity of the institutions itself. And we hope that in the long run, the capacity will be retained within the institutions. Hence, the capacity that is built with the help of consultants would be short-term. But we do see the importance of the consultants being around for at least for the next BUR, because we want to see a continuity of that expertise being transferred. And as the internal capacity has been built, one of the ways that we could use those consultants that has worked on the BUR and the NCs is to turn them to be internal reviewers within the country for us.
Any other contribution, comments? We're all familiar with what the CGE is doing, you know everything. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for your presentations. They're both very informative and helpful. I'm not sure if the CGE can answer this question, but in looking forward towards filling out the Paris Agreement framework and looking towards supporting developing countries in transparency, can either of you maybe speak to the role of the CGE in building out the relationships with the PCCB or the CBIT? And then I'm curious for Malaysia, in going through the ICA process and then building up a more robust MRV framework domestically, parties often find that this benefits them domestically in terms of building or planning their climate change policies or the development policies, if you've found that to be true in your case.
Maybe somebody at the back wants, Kamal, sorry.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you. I just came a little bit late, but I'm asking a question. I'm not sure that it was in the presentation because even I was late. The mandate of the CGE will end next year. The mandate of the CGE will end next year. And we clearly saw that in the 1CP21 or either what's going on under the Paris Agreement, there is no formal request to the CGE to do things clearly, to do activities under the Paris Agreement. And its mandate will end the next year by 2018. What the CGE is planning towards that with regard to its work plan, as well as what's under the negotiations for the next year. Why I'm asking this question this year, because of course this needs to be strategized and planned from this year, just to secure that the next year there will be either the extension of the CGE mandate or the transformation of the CGE to work better and more with regard to the particularly transparency issues and reporting issues under the Paris Agreement. I thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I don't know if maybe Stefan, you want to address some of maybe the two questions.
Yeah.
I think they're related to CGE directly.
Okay, I think, and the two questions are also related because one was on the role of the CGE in the implementation of the Paris Agreement and especially with respect to the PCCB. And the other one by Kamal was what happens after the CGE's current mandate ends in 2018. So first, the first question is the CGE, and this applies perhaps even to the second question because the CGE is not expressly mentioned in the Paris Agreement. But the CGE has worked with some of the institutions and organs, of course, established by the Paris Agreement, including the evolution or the establishment of the CBIT. The CGE, of course, have played a key role, collaborating, of course, with the JEF, which was given the mandate, of course, to roll out the CBIT, among other transparency organs. And of course, the CGE has also been involved in the work of the PCCB. Actually, the last week, the PCCB was meeting and the CGE was represented at each of the sessions of the PCCB. So we are trying to, of course, the CGE, we are trying to work with the institutions that have been given a specific or express mandate under the Paris Agreement. And the CGE is also, of course, alive to the fact that, of course, there will be a need for enhanced transparency, of course, under the Paris Agreement. And perhaps also, so the CGE has been thinking forward on how best then it can play a role as the transparency mechanism, of course, under the Paris Agreement evolves. How that role, of course, the CGE, of course, shapes up, again, depends on the parties themselves because the CGE is a party creation. And therefore, as you ask the CGE to respond to some of these questions, actually, it should be the parties to tell us that what they want the CGE to do. And I'm throwing the challenge definitely back to the parties because the CGE cannot decide on whether its mandate will be extended or not. It has to be the parties. The CGE cannot decide on whether it's going to play a central role in the implementation of the enhanced transparency mechanism or even in the global stocktake under the Paris Agreement and other transparency aspects of the Paris Agreement. It has to be a decision by the parties. And therefore, I foresee some, of course, as a role of the CGE, but that's from my own personal perspective. It is the parties ideally to decide what role, specific role that they would want the CGE to play. And that answers Kamal too, because that's why I said the two questions are related. Perhaps there's something that did not come out in my presentation because I have the flow, I take that advantage. And is that, of course, the CGE also works with parties or groups of parties on request, where, of course, because of sometimes the unique national circumstances of some of the parties, of the unique circumstances, of course, prevailing in some of the regions, the mandate of the CGE is such that then it's supposed also to accommodate a special request from parties or groups of parties, and we have done this in the past, of course, especially for, it was the Gulf, what is the real name? The Gulf countries, because we were invited, actually, GCC, yes. We were invited to help them to facilitate, of course, in one of the workshops that was actually hosted by the government of Qatar. And that is the only one that I can remember that parties have taken advantage of such a window of opportunity, where then parties can look at their own national circumstances, and then they find perhaps they might not, the regional workshops might not be enough to build their capacity to the level where they would want to be, or as a group of parties, of course, with similar circumstances, national circumstances. Then and that's I'm just throwing this deliberate so that parties can know that this window exists, and then it has not been exploited as much as perhaps parties thought when they were making that decision. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, please.
On the impact of the preparation of BUR and ICA processes on the policies and actions for the future. It is both the ratification of the Paris Agreement and also the participation by the ministries and agencies on the preparation of the BUR and the technical analysis phase of the ICA. I think those things goes together to build ownership, a very strong ownership among the ministries and their implementing agencies, both for quantification and for verification of their quantification part, and also setting greater ambitions in the implementation of mitigation actions. I think all of these are going hand in hand to build the MRV system within the country. And it's a very encouraging sign for us in Malaysia that this is occurring.
Perhaps with the permission of the moderator, I could again throw another challenge to the parties represented here. What is it that parties would want to see the CGE do for them that the CGE is not doing currently? Because it's also good to hear your views from that kind of a perspective. Something that you feel perhaps the CGE should have been providing to parties, and it's not being done, because this one way, of course, of getting feedback from parties so that then it can be included in the next CGE meeting as we discuss the rolling out of the work plan, of course, for this year and the subsequent years. Then these are perhaps some of the things that you think as parties that the CGE needs to consider.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I think I hope somebody will take advantage of this possibility you reminded everybody. But if you have other thoughts or questions or comments you want to share, because we still have a bit of time, please take advantage of the expertise in front of you. They are available for 45 more minutes. And we also have some other CGE members in the room. So even if you have questions about topics that were not touched upon in the presentation or anything specific on your mind, please feel free to share the questions or comment with us. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Kai from China and a student of the University of Edinburgh now. I'm just curious that is there a checking system after a country hand down their national inventories, so that is there a process that we hand down a draft one and a final one, or just a final one? Because in case some errors will come up and it will be in a very limited timeline. Thank you.
Well, as I would say, there's no formal requirement to go through sharing any draft, but that's still a possibility that is offered. And as Stefan rightly mentioned earlier, the CGE can respond to any specific request from a party. So if your country or another country feels the need that they'd like to share a draft document with the CGE to get a confidential feedback on this document, believe that's something that is falling right under the current mandate of the CGE, and that's something that can be explored, yes. Provided you send a request with not a 1 or 2 weeks deadline. I think for the CGE to process and mature this, but that's something that I believe is possible, yes. Yes, please.
The way in Malaysia we are doing is that we have the greenhouse gas inventory teams working on each of the sectors. And so we have the sectoral reports. Once the sectoral reports are ready, it comes to me as the project manager to check on the accuracy of the estimation and reporting. But within each of the own teams itself, there is the quality assurance part going on within them, and then it it comes to me for a second round of checking. And for the third round of this verification of whether the reports is complete following the TACCC principles, we are now engaging external experts to do the review for the upcoming one for the third national communication and the second biennial report. GIZ has provided reviewers for the energy and the IPPU sectors, and US EPA has provided reviewers for the waste sector and also the agriculture part of the AFOLU sector. For the LULUCF part of the AFOLU sector, we had also engaged an international expert to look through the report and advise us what are the improvements that could be done. And then after that, then we'll compile it into the national inventory, the whole national inventory report. That is the process that we are following now in the GHG inventory MRV system. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any other comment, question, concern? All right. Then if I see no other questions or willingness to share anything, I think people maybe are tired or need to get some food, raise their sugar level a little bit before the next session starts. And so on this note, I think I need to thank both presenters, Stefan and Mr. Yap, and also everybody for attending and sharing those questions and comments with us. And before closing formally this short side event, I need to remind you that there are some CD-ROMs from the CGE available outside this room, directly here on the table, as well as some documents. So please feel free to help yourself and take for your colleagues at home and distribute and share with them. On this note, wish you a good afternoon and a good day. Thank you.
I do. Now that I asked that question, I'm curious. Yeah, kind of way. Yeah, no, so it was we going forward. I think now is so many parties about because it's not like you can't memorize everything. Right. I'm sorry I missed it, but I heard it for a while. So congratulations. Yeah, so there's no magazine.
Okay.